What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and I'm here today with co-host of the Save Our Children podcast, Bridget Vega. And together, we are going to introduce you to one of our greatest inspirations in the music industry, rising, independent, Phoenix-born hip-hop lyricist, artist, father, patriot, visionary, producer, and man of God, Sincerely Collins. Born Kyle Collins, he is a survivor himself, having grown up without a father, surviving the early and mysterious disappearance of his mother, surviving homelessness, and being able to stand bravely in front of you today after his decision to throw everything he has into hip hop. In his own words, I make music for dreamers. I make music for people who just know that there's more. I make music for people who have visions, for people who believe in themselves, but don't necessarily know how to take action on that. Maybe they want to believe in themselves. Maybe they come to me, they come to my music to learn how to believe in themselves or to learn how to break away from the norm as much as they've wanted to their entire life. I just provide that bridge for people to unplug from the matrix. And unplugging from the matrix is exactly what happens when you plug into Sincerely Collins' powerful music. His newest album, Synchronicities, opens up with tracks such as War of the Roses, that encapsulate his incredible story of overcoming adversity as a child to an adult and takes you into powerhouse hits like Revolution that make you want to blast the volume all the way up as you're driving down Las Vegas Boulevard with the windows down. Kyle says about his newest single, Glow, with Hi-Rez the Rapper and Julia Ross, that this could be the biggest song I've done so far, and a song I highly recommend you download, along with his plethora of other albums and singles. He has most recently sat down with Gilbert Police in Arizona to reopen his mother's missing persons file. And after 30 years of unanswered questions, Kyle has found the strength to find answers to a mystery that's plagued him for his whole life. Sincerely Collins is an inspiration, and his defiance to the typical Hollywood model in music is encouraging a musical revolution in the music industry where artists and aspiring artists all over the world are going independent and following his lead. We are honored to bring to you today the one, the only Kyle Collins, aka Sincerely Collins. Thank you both for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing, and that intro was sweet.
There's so much content on about you. I was like, how do I put this into one intro? I could have made like 10 minutes of an intro.
I feel important. Like I feel like my self-esteem went up.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. Like I was telling you before you came on, you know, you've really paved the way in the music industry in a different way than what's traditional. And it's been very inspiring. And I want to start off, you've known Bridget for a long time, and I'd love to talk about how you guys met. That way people understand. I brought Bridget on today because of the relationship that they have and thought it would be really fun to where Bridget could help me co-host, but she'll also be part of the interview, helping corroborate Kyle's answers for some of the questions for him today. So how did you two meet, and how did you guys end up connecting?
Do I go first?
Sure.
So me and Bridget probably met back in like somewhere around probably like 2010, something like that, which is a long ass time ago. And I've done business with her brother, like her brother was a promoter and stuff like that. And so we just always like ran into each other and knew the same people, knew the same friends and stuff. And I think just along our journeys, we always kept in touch, and we just ended up kind of meeting in a similar space. Our journeys ended up meeting in the same area. And it's been a blessing to have her as, a friend and someone that I can confide in, and someone that we can talk about this kind of stuff, serious stuff, and also just be friends too, you know what I mean? And not be on that kind of stuff. So it's really important, I feel like, when you're on a journey like this, to have people around you who you're comfortable with, who you've known for a long time. And because most of the time you don't have those people, you know what I mean? So like if you do find somebody who's went along that same journey or taken a different route, but still got to came to some of the same conclusions and have those similarities, then you have to take action on it.
Yeah, definitely. And just me growing up and being around the entertainment industry and helping my brother with his shows, promo, and different things around our community in general. Just we were always either in the same space, but again, usually it's always in passing or knowing mutual people in the entertainment industry and just connecting. And when it comes to his music, it's always something that I've gravitated to just because he's always been at a different level, especially the mindset of what's in Arizona, especially in the entertainment industry in general. So breaking the matrix, especially with everything that's been going on in the whole pandemic, and seeing like the shift in his journey, it's something that I've always been one to support. And I would say real recognize real, and just pretty much staying in contact with him. And then just going into the whole human trafficking and everything that we started and me connecting with Emma, it was like, we need some music. And so he's not one to shy away from controversy and touching on topics that majority of people won't touch. And so really just calling him and being like, hey, we need some music in the entertainment industry touching on this subject. And of course, he is great with visuals, and no one can touch anything that he puts out just because of, even though there's symbolism throughout Hollywood, the visuals he uses, he does it at a higher frequency. And so he still leaves it to where it's open to where people, it makes people think like, did he just do that? And then you listen to the lyrics. And so tying those two together, it's his work and everything that he's created is something that I've always respected. So yeah, then just always making sure to be like, hey, can we connect on this project or whatever we're doing? It's always been a mutual respect. So yeah.
So neat. And Bridget, that's something, we don't come on the podcast. It's not our interview. We're always interviewing other people. And I also wanted to shine light on that a lot of people don't know your background with entertainment, and that you guys currently on the Save Our Children podcast are featuring a ton of independent artists, a lot of conservative artists, a lot of patriotic artists, and people really fighting the traditional Hollywood entertainment system. And I think it's really neat that, for people to know that your background started a lot in entertainment. And so you have that keen eye that maybe a lot of people don't, and maybe don't recognize that you're talking from experience and you're bringing these artists on from a passion that you've had from a long time. It's not just something that, you're doing spur of the moment. You have a deep passion and care for this. I'd love to ask you, Bridget, when you first heard Sincerely Colin's music, what was your first impression the first time that you ever heard it?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say it was definitely different. And just when you tie his lyrics to the visual, he really tells a story of his whole life. And as you see his different albums and follow him along that journey, it's really showing his growth. And you can see his childhood all the way to like even today and where he's at, even dealing with everything going on with his mom and how he grew up and how he's overcome so much adversity, no matter what anyone's ever told him. And even when you have people not in your circle and telling you you can't do something, he always had that vision for himself to not only do better for himself, but then now his daughter. And he's always his own competition. So you can see that reflection in his growth throughout all his music.
That's so powerful. I love that. I get that same impression. I'm newer to finding your music. I found it, Bridget's introduced me to a lot of new artists. I've traditionally had the, top 40 or just what's mainstream in my life. And I haven't got to dig a lot into the new and upcoming artists that are doing the more independent style. So it's been really awesome these last couple of years, just living vicariously through Bridget and getting playlists that she sends me and new artists. So that's really neat to see how the relationship started and how long you guys have been friends and, have been kind of cheering each other on in that way. Now, Kyle, for you, I'd love to know what is the inspiration behind your music? And can you talk a little bit about your childhood and growing up and kind of leading up to how you decided on this being a career for yourself?
Yeah. Well, my situation with the disappearance of my mother, that's definitely been the biggest inspiration for my career. Um, it's I never really realized this until maybe recently, but it's definitely been like a magnetic north, like a northern light for me. You know, like if not for anything else, for this type of thing. Um, so anything that I ever did was always with this like chip on my shoulder, and I didn't necessarily see it as a chip, but I always endorsed it. I always, I always owned it. And so up until about, I would say, ninth grade, basketball was my love. Basketball was like what I spent all my time doing. And then it was like the summer of 10th grade or something like that, or the summer of ninth grade or something. Um, I went to my cousin's house and he showed me like how to write music and how to produce and how to record. Excuse me. And I just never put the pen down since then. And that became my new love. And it was a lot more personal. It was a lot more, I felt obviously a lot more therapy from writing and getting my emotions out than, basketball was more of a physical, like, let me physically get this stress out of my body. But this was like more when I started tapping into my intellectual side. So that's really how it all started, and where the inspiration came from. And I was talking to someone yesterday. I realized I've been writing songs about my situation, my family, my life, my um, troubles, my challenges. I've been writing about these things since the very first time that I've been writing, which I find very interesting because at the time I didn't know I was doing this. I was just rapping. I was just creating. I was writing poetry. I was just doing it. You know what I mean? I didn't really know I was really getting some emotions out. So yeah, that's where the inspiration comes from. It just comes from my life, comes from situations. Um, and I try to balance the two. I try to have fun with it as well. Like, there's a lot of songs where you're not gonna find me being too serious because I'm not a serious person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a very serious person, but I also know my mission. So it's gonna be like half and half. Whatever whatever you find from me, you know what I mean? It's gonna be half and half. It's gonna be like, or it's gonna be just all message. But I like to keep it light and sprinkle the message. And then on a lot of songs, I sprinkle the message in something that sounds light. So I would say that's probably my go-to forte, is like creating something that sounds easy to listen to. It sounds pop culture. It sounds not even pop culture, it just sounds pop. And but relay that message so that the youth really dissects it without it's almost like opposite of the machine. It's like countering the matrix, because you're still kind of like against people's will, sort of like giving them a message. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm gonna tell you you're listening to this, but you're actually listening to this. You know what I mean? But it's with the codes that I feel are important. Are important for people to break and dissolve the codes that they've been, you know, accustomed to.
That's amazing. It's so interesting how, looking back as a child or as a young adult, even in school, how we can piece that together later on in life and say, oh wow, like I've in a way intuitively known my path that I would take as an adult since I was young, but at the time I had no idea that I was basically creating a career for myself.
Right. Exactly.
It's interesting. Now, who are some of your musical inspirations growing up?
So I grew up with my grandparents raising me, so there was a lot of like jazz and like oldies at first, in my early childhood. And then when I would hear stuff that was like pop culture, it was always it was always just that. It was always like the most poppiest thing that was out. So like I really didn't come up knowing very many rap songs or knowing like hip hop at all. Like my first CD was Smash Mouth. Like why? You know what I mean? Um, but but then like sixth, seventh grade came around and like, kids start showing you other stuff. So um really early on I became very into Nelly. Nelly was one of my biggest inspirations, still is one of my biggest inspirations. I think that's where my like keen pop melodic sense comes from. Um, who else coming up? I studied a lot of Jay-Z growing up. Um, just his flow, and like he had this unorthodox thing that he did when he rapped that was like it made it to where there are no boundaries when you rap, and it's just one of these things that like if you're a hip hop artist, what Jay-Z did for as far as like opening up the flow for rap and it not being so like da 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 da. But so there was Jay-Z. Who were some other inspirations? Some later inspirations in life were like Pharrell. Pharrell's probably my biggest musical inspiration. Kanye's probably my biggest creative inspiration. Um, who else? Who else? Who else? Who else? I listened to a lot of Sublime in high school and started a rock band when I was 19 till I was like 24, which was like obviously 19 to 24. It's a pretty big chunk of my life, So that's definitely been a dominant part of my life too. So yeah, all over the spectrum as far as inspirations.
How did you end up deciding on the name Sincerely Collins? What's the background on your name?
It's not that it's not that that deep. but it is funny.
Like I'm so simple.
Like it's the story is just really dumb. So so I decided to drop Kyle from my name for a couple of reasons. A, because Super Duper Kyle, who used to go by KID, had just changed his name to Kyle. And so I didn't want to be, Kyle Collins. And also I just felt like I wanted to not put on a persona, but I wanted to have something to step into, like an alter ego to step into, that I could step aside from my regular day person and be this, superhero or whatever it was. And so I started thinking of names, and for a while I just went by Collins. And I think that was that caught on pretty quick. And after a while, I just, I'd had an eye out for like what should be the full moniker, because I always knew there was going to be something added to it, or Collins was going to be the first name or something like that. And and one day I was in this bar, and I was I was in the bathroom stall, and on the wall of the bathroom stall it said, "Don't forget to put the seat down for the ladies. Sincerely, the management." And I saw sincerely the management, and for some reason I just was like, "Oh, sincerely, like that's cool. Like that's a nice little sign off, or even like introduction. Like I'm sincere, you know what I mean?" And it just represented like sincere, like true, like authentic, So I just felt like it went with it. And so yeah, taking a piss in the bathroom stall.
Brilliant. I always love hearing stories, because a lot of times from the outside looking in, we always think, gosh, there must have been some amazing revelation that happened. But more often than not, it is something that simple where somebody's stuck trying to think of a name, and it's when you stop trying to think and there's something that pops up in life and you're like, oh, that's my life.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's like when you stop what's the word, constricting so much, you know what I mean, and you just let go, it gives room for flow.
100%. I'd love to hear this perspective from both of you. You both have highly defined and defied the Hollywood model, and it's really untraditional. You don't see that a lot, and that's, you know, breaking out of the matrix of what we're used to and what's pushed on us and what we're programmed for music. I'd love to know how both of you came to that realization that, hey, I'm not gonna maybe indulge in this, or I'm not gonna participate in it. I'm not gonna listen to it. This is the route that I want to go. Bridget, from a perspective of her own listening and how she ended up, you know, being attracted to that type of music. And then for you, Kyle, just how you decided to not go that traditional route that, you know, 99% of people either go or try to go.
You want to go first?
Sure. So I would say I always group around the sports industry and the entertainment industry. So just being around it, and there's a lot of money exchanged and you can't trust everybody. So the circles are really small. So with my brother and the artist he was working with, from local level all the way to a A-list celebrity level, especially as we got older, and then being able to even work in Vegas at Dre's and do different shows in California, and just seeing a lot firsthand. I was exposed to a lot at a young age. Doesn't mean I always agreed with it, but I also knew how to navigate through it. And I think for me, just being so hands-on from different levels of the promotions to then getting deeper into the business level and doing some artist promotion and like throwing the concerts and different aspects of the entertainment industry. And then also through the sports industry, it really opened my eyes to a lot. And then once I had my daughter, it changed kind of my perspective, and as well as the environment and the toxicity of it, and just like the overall culture. But then there's actually a personal situation that happened where, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a personal situation with with someone who is local, who I once had worked with, that I ended up on World Star, not for a good reason, and ended up being jumped at a concert, at a backstage of a rap concert in a green room. And so once that whole situation happened, it really pulled me back from the entertainment industry. And it was no longer about, because again, I was doing it mostly for my brother and money and having someone there that you could trust. And then once things started to shift as I got older, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. And so just that whole situation of, it actually took a World Star event and going, I didn't mean to go viral on something, but I did. So I pulled myself out of it just because of the whole situation, where then it turned to like a court case, and my family and all of that then got put in the light of where I no longer wanted to associate with any of that. So I completely pulled myself out of it, and I would just stay connected to like certain people in the industry. And I would still go to concerts, but that was like the first time I ever stepped out by myself. And yeah, so that's really actually changed my whole aspect, even on the club scene and even being out in Arizona as well.
Wow, I didn't even know that about you. So I'm learning stuff about you too, Bridget.
So what was it that like that shifted you all the way to where you are now, though, to where it's like you're working against as opposed to just not working with?
I would say definitely knowing everything that I know now when it ties to the human trafficking aspect and the whole symbolism, because I knew and picked up on it. But as we went deeper into the rabbit holes, I would say tying that to human trafficking, and then just really the enlightenment over the years of looking like, okay, I was working with promotion girls, and then they would literally sometimes go down the path of hooking up with the artist, and I always got to see the duality of it,
Right.
both sides. So then I was like, I felt like I was, in a way, they have their choice, but at the same time I was like, I'm putting them in a position to get closer to the artist. So then I kind of held that to myself, where I was like, I wouldn't want this for my daughter or myself.
Right.
So then I stepped back and was like, I looked at the bigger picture of everything and was like, I can't tie that to myself or to my brand and who I am. So then I pulled myself out of it completely.
That makes sense.
Good answer. It's always interesting seeing kind of what people's aha moments are. We have them with everything, you know, whether it is a movie or there's so many different things in life, politics. I think music's a fascinating one because we're so programmed from the time that we're little, you know, all the music that we hear is Disney.
Yep.
And then that leads us into these pop stars, you know, Britney Spears on the Disney Channel becoming Britney Spears, the teenager with Hit Me Baby One More Time. And it's so pushed in our faces. And I think that that's, you know, it's
then
awesome.
20 years later, we see Britney and we are like, holy shit.
100%. Yes. And so it's neat seeing people pull away from that. And especially because we do know that there's child abuse in that industry, you know, so it's something that just from a morality perspective that a lot of us should at least be putting our foot down and acknowledging that part, you know. So I love that you both are standing so strong. What about you, Kyle? What was your aha moment with your decision to take the route that you did?
It wasn't really my choice. I feel like it was my environment. You know, your environment molds you into the person you are. And if your environment changes, you will change. And so that kind of, with that being said, it took me down a few paths, but my magnetic north, like I said, has always been sincerity. And it's always been telling my story. And but another thing that I would attribute it to is my cousin who taught me you know, how to rap and how to make music. He was very conscious. He was very much like, he grew up on like late 80s, early 90s rap, like before Tupac took over, before NWA, like where it was just conscious. And you know, grew up on Nas, KRS-One, Rakim, Mos Def. And so I really embraced that. And, you know, he saw me listening. He heard the CDs and stuff that I was listening to, like and I was never listening to anyone like crazy. I never took it overboard. Like the worst thing at the time to listen to, as far as just like not getting any type of like substance, was like Yin Yang Twins, or just like a lot of Southern artists, a lot of Southern rappers at the time, like that. Like those were the rappers who were just like about like ringtones and dances and like not really substance. And whenever my cousin saw me kind of like even just listening to any of that, even though I was already like not really about that kind of shit, if he saw me just like playing along, like because one of my friends was listening to it, he'd make sure to tell me like, yo, you know, that's whack as fuck, right? Like, you know what I mean? And then show me something that was dope. And this was all his opinion. This wasn't like my opinion. This was me taking on his opinion. But it evolved into mine too, because I understood why. Like I resonated with why. And that was the main thing. And then another thing that I will attribute it to, which I've never said on camera or on record, is when I was in 10th and 11th grade, I had my second job ever at Aeropostale in Chandler Mall. All right. So let's go back to Aeropostale at Chandler Mall, 2005 real quick.
Zombie days.
Yeah, like right? I was preppy as fuck. I was weird. So I worked there and I had this boss. It was like this short white dude named Eric. And Eric fucking took me to school every single day. He brought me, I don't know if you guys would know what this is, but Sound Bombing is like this, it's like this mixtape that came out in the early 90s by this group called Ruckus. It was like Ruckus Records, and they had like some of the best artists on it. Anyways, Eminem freestyled on this record, and it was like Eminem's first time on a national scale. He showed me this CD. He's like schooling me. He's taking me to school, showing me Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Common. He's introduced me to all these artists and like taking me to his dad's house and like playing the shit on like loud like surround sound speakers so like I could really hear it. And he's showing me like, then he takes me back. He's like, oh, you don't know this stuff? All right, well, let me take you back even further. Like, let me show you Otis Redding. Let me show you, he showed me Grandma's Hands by, is that Otis Redding or Sam Cooke? One of those two. But he showed me like all these records and like a white dude like taking me to school. Like it was crazy. And I owe a lot of my style, a lot of my just what I do, what lane I occupy. I owe a lot of that to him too. And then I would say the holy trinity of that would be just growing up with my grandparents, and them, even though my grandparents had a lot of like dirt to hide that I didn't know about, and a lot of stuff that like I also wouldn't know about just because like they were always old to me, like they were never young in my life, you know, so I just wouldn't know how they were or what they were into or whatever. So even though like they had a previous life prior to me, I knew them as my grandparents the entire time. So it was like I had this like old spirit, old soul environment around me, you know. So I think the trifecta of those three things kind of made it to where it was going to be hard for me to stray too far into something that was like not genuine, not meaningful, not didn't have a message behind it. It's hard for me to do that kind of stuff, you know. It doesn't even, not that it doesn't even feel right. It's just I can't. It's hard to do. Literally, it's hard to do. I'm much better at just like reaching deep inside my heart and trying to find something to say, as opposed to like, how can I say nothing? You know what I mean? Like, it's just hard. So
100%. I love that you said substance, because people who are, newer generations or younger, they don't know about Eric B. and Rakim and Gangstar, and some of the very early artists that it was really positive. Like the messages that they put out were so positive, and they told a story whenever you listened to it. You could listen to an album from cover to cover.
And they were empowering.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that aspect, because it really has changed a lot throughout the years, and it's unconscious. People more listen, like we're conditioned now, like how you said yin yang twins. If somebody were to just take the words off of a song without the music and just read it on paper, they'd be like, what the hell is this even talking about?
Right.
Yeah, it's what's blasted in clubs. It's number one on, radios. I mean, at least it was. I don't know if they're, big now, but it's interesting seeing, the lack of substance. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've seen evolve in the industry, from seeing so many artists, and like how you define substance and some of the things that resonate with you in your own writing.
Sorry, I'm looking something up because I want to make sure I'm accurate with what I'm about to tell you.
No worries.
I
love that. Like, it's like what I was saying in the intro, it's like, and how Bridget was saying, your music, you have that element where you can appreciate listening to the album cover to cover, start to finish, and it tells a story versus just, a song here about this and a song here about that. Like, there's so much intention behind what you've done.
Right. I was gonna say something about the what you were talking about, like with the shift and where that started to happen. And I think that a lot of that started to happen with the CD era, and things and technology and where it was headed, and how certain parties could monopolize and capitalize on the most influential culture on the planet. I think back to, I don't know if it was 1996, 1998, deregulation of the radio industry. 1996, Telecommunications Act of 1996. I believe this is the act that Bill Clinton signed. And what it did is it allowed crossovers between industry, specifically entertainment, specifically music. So it made it to where someone who owns a privately owned prison can now purchase a record label, can now purchase a radio station. It made it to where, someone who owns Pfizer can now own stock in Def Jam and have influence on the artists that they sign. And, lean's become real popular lately. Stuff like that, So I think that's where it started. I think it was Bill Clinton, 1996, and him signing that bill. And it made it to where, the industry is where we are today. Violence was pushed heavily because the prisons need to be filled. Drug use was pushed heavily because the drugs need to be purchased, and violence and crime needs to continue. So I think that's where it started, and I think culture has been manipulated, and at the expense of the consumer, and through the almost using rappers as avatars.
That's a really good way to put that. Go ahead, Bridge.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, so you as an artist, especially an independent artist, how do you navigate around something like that, especially when you're so versatile and you're not one of labels, nor you create outside of the box, and so you don't really mold to what society is pushing, and you're always trying to raise that frequency, and you always refer to the light and dark army. So can you just go into how you, even as an independent artist, navigate through even this shift that we're in today?
How I navigate through it, I just listen to what I feel like I'm supposed to do. I definitely feel like I went through a phase where I felt like I had to do more than I was supposed to, than what I know I'm supposed to do now, which is just to create. I'm put here to create and give my messages and give my codes. And when I stray too far away from that, it really shows up in my life. It shows up because I feel like I'm not doing what comes natural. And so I've just learned to do what comes natural, which is keep creating, keep making music, and finding my tribe through that, finding my tribe through the connection that they find through my music.
Great answer and good question, Bridge. Now, for both of you, when you guys say the symbolism in Hollywood or in the Hollywood model industry when it comes to music, what do you guys both see with that as far as defining what symbolism is, maybe for people who are kind of just learning about the alternative route to go with independent music?
Just watch The Weeknd's latest campaign. That's all you got to do. Just watch The Weeknd's latest campaign, because he is screaming bloody murder. because he's been trapped in this thing, and he knew he was in it. He sang about it before he got in it, and he wanted it so bad. And now that he's in it, he wants out so bad, and we all know you can't get out. So what can you do? All you can do is just scream bloody murder. All you can do is just make songs like Michael Jackson made, you know? But I feel like that will give you an easy tie. And it's almost to the point where I feel like the public is woke. It's kind of just like if you decide whether or not you're going to buy into it or whether you're just going to like subconsciously blow it off. Because a lot of people subconsciously blow it off. Like I hear people say they see it, but then they still consume in the same way. They just find it interesting that they see it, you know? And so some people take action and some people are NPCs, you know, non-player characters. They're just computers, just going around as part of the game.
100%. What about you, Bridge?
I would say definitely it's in plain sight. And I would agree with Kyle. I would also say that so many people say that they don't participate in it, but they do, because if they're supporting that celebrity or if they're buying that music and supporting that person as an artist, they are subjecting themselves to that. So I would say, like for us, I know on both of our podcasts, we always talk about taking your dollar back and supporting the right message and what's in alignment with you, and supporting the independent artists in that message and what the true inspiration that they're pushing, and kind of shifting the culture. So in order to do that, whether if you can't do it physically through monetarily with money, definitely liking, sharing, streaming the content is another way to do that, and supporting those independent artists. I would also say when it comes to Disney, just watch and listen to your kids' shows for 5 to 10 minutes and watch the walls and what's in the background, and just know that your child's being programmed. We were all programmed at a young age. So I would say really just tune into what you're listening to and the message behind it, and it's in plain sight.
It really is too. You know, it's right in our faces, and it's amazing. I look at videos that I watched as a child, or I look at, you know, old magazine covers that come up on Instagram that people pick apart now, or, you know, the Got Milk campaign and all these things that we just accepted without even asking a single question, or being like, hey, that person's all bloody in this photo shoot and they look like a demon, but it's on the cover of a magazine, or it's in a music video that's on a top 40 chart. So it must be okay and it must be cool. You know,
wait, can you tell me about the Got Milk campaign?
Gosh, you know, I have been digging into that. I can't say that I have a concrete answer, but I mean, I want people to just think about that. It was Got Milk. The campaign never even had a brand attached to it. And from what I've learned, some different takes that people have expressed was back then, whenever that campaign came out, we didn't have all the internet that we have now to project or campaign for human trafficking. But if you think about it, on every milk carton back in those days, there was a missing child. So was that actually a missing child, or was that a campaign to traffic children to let traffickers know what kids were in the network? You know, because we didn't have the internet access back then that we do now. And then other people say that milk is another name for Moloch, the demon.
Wow.
There's also a tie to demonism for people who, you know, are familiar with that. It can have a double entendre for the meaning of milk too.
Right. That's wild.
Yeah.
I always wondered about the Got Milk thing, because it wasn't like Got Milk by Shamrock. Like it was like just got milk.
Whose milk was it? What brand of milk was it? You know?
Yeah.
But that's another thing, right? Just like how in music videos, we just accepted all of this thinking that this was normal, and never asked a question just because there was a top 40 artist supporting it, but there's a lot of questions as adults that we have now that I don't know if we'll get the complete answers to anytime soon, but I love that there's movements pushing against this in a really positive way, and seeing these different artists come up like yourself and people supporting them like Bridget. It's so inspiring to see people going against that and like kind of putting their foot down and saying, no, like I'm going to do things in a more positive, uplifting way with substance and be more creative with how I put a message out and like be very sensitive to who I know is on the other side listening. Now for you, Kyle, you just had an awesome album come out, and how Bridge was talking about the visuals that you put out to go along with it. Can you talk about synchronicities? Can you talk about some of the video inspirations that you've had and just your inspiration in general on how you created that album and, what it means to you?
Yeah.
Wait,
So
I'm going to cut you off. Before you do that, can you kind of share for those who haven't listened to your music for the first time? And it's a lot, but you can do it because you're you. Can you start at Destroyer and kind of then go through the Legend of the Phoenix and through your kind of your journey?
Yeah.
For those of you who are just listening to you the first time, because I think that is an important piece of what shares who you are today as an artist, especially because like going down that journey, like you'll see he gets more edgy. And like I always tell him, like most people wait until something tragic happens, or like you see when an artist or celebrity or someone passes and they don't give them their credit in that respect for the art that they've created. So I'm always like, talk that shit, get your flowers while you're alive, because you see that whole journey and you see him get more of an edginess towards the end of his like later albums.
Can I ask you a question? When you say edginess, what do you mean by edginess?
Some will say, well, I think for me it's different because some will say ego, but and I hate the word, I hate using it with you, but I'm going to say it anyways. You're so humble and you don't always, because you're your hardest critic, you don't always accept and celebrate your success of where you're at. So you're always leveling up yourself. So I would say I picked up, especially in your later albums, you have more of, some will say ego, some will say cockiness, but it's like a good edginess
Confidence.
where you're like owning it. And you're like, you can hear it in your vulnerability, but you can see also the shift in your music, especially as you've awakened more and sharing like that journey and letting more people into that space, especially in your new album. You can see that shift, and you even going to like even talking about God, and the more success, and you can see as you rise, you own, like I see it as a shift from Sincerely Collins to Kyle Collins.
Okay, I know what you're saying. All right, so I'll start it back at Destroyer. So Destroyer came out in 2015. That was like that I felt like was an album where I had to introduce the world to myself, but also at the same time I had to make music that was so compelling that anyone who heard it was going to save it, whether they liked it or whether they just thought it was just like, okay, I need to show someone this because it's like, what the fuck? I wanted it to stand out that much from the sonically. So that, and there was also a lot of darkness in that album. Like that album was my first like getting emotions out that I didn't really know were there album. And it also produced my first hit, Light Work, and one of my biggest songs called Soul as well. And then moving forward, I dropped Legend of the Phoenix in 2016. And that album was one side of what Destroyer was. It was the it was the vulnerable, let me tell my story side of me, you know, just kind of just fully, I would say, Legend of the Phoenix is almost fully shedding of the ego. It's like just completely, there's some egoic moments, like, because I mean, I'm still me. Like I still had the confidence in me, and I still had the fire in me, but I was definitely broken down to my core and expressing it. And then what happened after that? What did I do after that? Then I took quite a while off, actually, and I dropped Yap Yap in 2018, which ended up being one of my biggest singles. And that song is one of those pop songs that's just very encoded, like that we talked about. And that was kind of its own season itself. Yap Yap, you know, it was a big single, so it kind of had its own season apart from an album. And spent 2018 to 2019 just kind of dropping like little random like mixtape type projects. And then in the end of 2019, I dropped was it 2019 or 2020? It was 2020 I dropped Alien, actually. March 2020 I dropped Alien. Damn, that's crazy. It seems like longer. So March 2020 I dropped Alien, and that album was so if Legend of the Phoenix was me broken down and ego stripped, this was me sewing myself back together. This was like it's like sparring, kind of training camp. And then Synchronicities is it's funny because I feel like sonically Synchronicities is my best album. Like I feel like my newest album is my best album. And it's so recent, like I just dropped it. So I kind of don't know what it is yet, because my projects always seem to manifest themselves a little bit later in life, and I can reflect on them and be like, oh, okay, like that was this season for me. One thing I can say about Synchronicities is that the album title is going hand in hand with everything that's happening in my life right now. Like I've always noticed synchronicities. I've always been aware, not always, but you know, since I've been woke, I've been aware of synchronicities. This is a different level. This is like, hey, notice this, okay? You know, so, you know, I just take those things as like, I'll know what they mean when the time comes, you know. I knew I had to call it synchronicities. And it all stemmed from something that had nothing to do with the word synchronicities. It had to do with the word sync, because when you place songs for movies, when you place certain songs in movies and television shows, that's called syncing. Like they get a sync license. And I made most of these songs with the intention to get them synced. And then it was only later, you know, like the sincerely thing, it was only later where I realized, like, I kept hearing the word synchronicities, and sync was short for synchronicities, so I could kind of play off of both of them. And synchronicities made it make more sense for my listeners, as opposed to just like sync. Okay, maybe he means synchronicities, maybe he means to lock something together, whatever. But to actually name it synchronicities and then sync be the short name for it, it was like, okay, this is why it's a Sincerely Collins album. You know what I mean? Like it all manifests itself in real time.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so neat. It's interesting seeing that journey, and how Bridget said how it's like every album you're outdoing your last one, which is honestly opposite of what we see in traditional music. It seems like an artist, for example, Eminem had a lot of great stuff, and he still comes out with stuff that's good, but it's like those first couple albums, it's hard for some of these artists to compete with that. It's like they get famous, and then they start going from storytelling to, how you said, talking about things without substance, talking about all the money that they have and all the drugs that they have access to and all the girls, and that's fine in some context, but it's interesting seeing how with more of these independent artists, the goal is, how do I get better than I was last time? Not how do I just come out with the best beat, or how do I, make it to the top of the charts? It's like, how can I pour my heart and soul more into these albums?
Right. And I feel like, energy isn't created nor destroyed. So I feel like each one of my projects is the same energy going back into like a little like bubble to like mix it up, and then coming out a different way, but the same and the same energy, so like I have this like alternative style with like, good raps and experience in full musicianship from guitar to bass to drums to keys to being in a live band to growing up listening to oldies. So like I have this formula in my head that makes up who I am as a musician, and it comes out in different ways. So it might come out in, okay, this is an urban album, but you hear these like rock influenced choruses or something, or like or you might hear like things sprinkled in throughout the album, or you might get a rock feeling album with like these hip hop inspired moments in them, or you might get this like perfect fusion of both where you can't really tell the difference, or it might be leaning just a little more one way or a little more the other way. So it's like, it's really just like taking your own like aura back in and then spitting it back out however you see fit in that moment in time.
Oh, that's such a cool analogy. Now, whenever you do make an album, is it something that is spontaneous where you just are inspired and you'll sit there and all of a sudden an album's finished? Or is there a process that you go through to create it and, have roadblocks here and there too?
One thing that I didn't realize about anything on a professional level is that money is a huge factor, always. No matter like if you're about the money, or if you're like, or if money's just a byproduct of what you do, either way, you still have to make a living, right? So I remember when I realized that money was a bigger factor than the team you played on when Steve Nash left the Suns and went to the Lakers for more money. And I realized that like that was a moment that triggered me that like, oh, like that's actually a thing. Like you don't care as much about playing for these people. You know what I mean? So just to throw that kind of thought out there, because, we've been taught to think about it one way, but there's also like a lot of other ways to think about it. Like in another way, like you are a slave to this corporation that you're playing basketball for. Like, why wouldn't you leave and go get a better opportunity? You know what I mean? But like, as a fan, you can be like, oh, he's selfish thinking about the money. You know what I mean? So like, there's all these different aspects. And I say that to say that the same thing goes for music. The same thing goes for any entertainment industry. So sometimes you're making an album because like you've been working tirelessly and endlessly for 10 months, and you look down and you have 12 songs that are really good. So you decide, okay, like it's time to wrap this up and add a couple more songs and put some packaging together and figure out a campaign and do an album. And then sometimes it's like there's a bag waiting for you at the end of it and you need to put out an album. So you decide to go back into the lab and work and come up with whatever it is that you feel like the world needs from you at that time, because it's your job, So there's a lot of different things that go into it. So I've started an album because a distribution company that I'm partnering with wants me to do an album within the next 6 months, and I got some sort of deal with them, and so I decided to go in the back cave and work. And then I've also done albums where it's like, you know, I've literally just been working, and now I have a body of work, and there's no partnership, there's no anything, but this just feels like it needs to be out, and so you put it out. So I say all that to say, you know, there's so many different reasons why, as far as the timing, as far as what you do, but I look at it all as God just queuing up what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, because it all ends up being the same thing. Like it just all ends up working out in the same way, even if you started for different reasons, you know.
What advice do you have for people who want to get in this industry and want to follow a lead like yours, or like some of these other artists that aren't taking the traditional route?
In this day and age, I would just say, just keep putting out content, keep putting out music. You can get music out to people so much easier and faster than you ever could. And it's not really about how many people check it out at first. It's just about you getting it out there, because when people get a hold of it, they will go back and listen to your old shit. So it's not, you don't need to worry about like, okay, like I need to get 100,000 streams on this song right now, and if I don't, I'm a failure. I would just say, just keep creating, because the more you create with the tools that you have in front of you, the more God will provide new tools for you to create on a higher level.
I love that. I think that really goes for anything too. You know, it's easy even with podcasting to be like, oh my gosh, we have these really great shows, but we only have 50 subscribers on our YouTube channel. But I get that all the time now, new people coming in and saying, gosh, I'm so happy that you have all these episodes from a year ago that I can go back and listen to, you know?
Right. Exactly.
And Bridge, did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, not on that. I was just going to say, from previous conversation with your latest album, I would say that one, it seems more free flowing, and you have, it's so versatile of everything that you've had on all of your albums in one. So I would say for that one, it's more of that free spirit and like the higher frequency. And I know when I first heard a couple of the tracks, I was like, what is that? Especially the instruments. I was like, what is that noise? And so just like, I think it was the ukulele that I fell in love with, right?
Yeah.
So neat. I love that. The Revolution song, that one is just like such a powerhouse song, you know, even the name. I'm like, gosh,
Right.
this is something that, and I have done it, like just drive down the street, windows down, and just pumping it so loud. I love that you have kind of the ballad aspects, and on the same album, you have these bangers that are so infectious with the melodies and the instruments and the hooks. You know, it's great to see that diversity on one single album.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. Now, you right now are opening up an investigation, I should say reopening up an investigation into one of the biggest, if not the biggest influence of your life to why you're doing this today. Why are you choosing to reopen the investigation, and what's kind of your inspiration behind going back into that case with your mother?
Well, I originally, when I did Legend of the Phoenix in 2016, that was one of the most vulnerable times of my life, because I was finding out a lot of new information about my mother, about the case, about my family, about situations. Like, it was almost like I was just getting this avalanche of new information, and people being willing to, like uncles being willing to come tell me something they knew, and aunts telling me something I said when I was little, and like just stuff like that. And so it started to spark my curiosity. And in that same year, I met my real father for the first time, who I'd never met in my entire life. And, you know, he told me stuff that I didn't know about my mother and about him and her, and why they had broken up, and stuff that I hadn't been told my entire life. And just a lot of new things were happening in my psyche. You know, a lot of things were changing as far as what I knew. Things were becoming, my history was changing in front of me. And because of that, I was in the most vulnerable and most, I would say, most just out of tune that I've ever been. Just there's a better word for this. I'm trying to figure out what it is. But yeah, 2016 was just like it was definitely like the roughest year of my life. And so I had reopened the investigation in like May of that year, and I had also started a tour, and I had just met my dad, and I was finding out all this crazy shit about my mom's situation. I just wrote this song called Red Coat about my mother's situation, and a lot was pouring down. And I feel like I just got to a point where it all became way too heavy, and it just started to weigh on me, and I kind of I had a nervous breakdown in 2015. So in 2016, I didn't have another nervous breakdown, but it was like post-traumatic stress of a nervous breakdown. It was like, okay, I maybe don't even want to do this because of how it's affecting me and how it's affecting my livelihood and how it's affecting my nervous system. And so I put it down after I reopened it in 2016 into 2017. And then my grandfather passed away in 2019, Christmas of 2019. And then my grandmother passed away the next Christmas of 2020. No, he passed away in 2020. She passed away in 2021, this past year. And there was a lot of like burden, hidden secrets, hidden information that I didn't know about, circumstances and situations that are just like weird, that just I can't really piece together, that my grandparents were kind of at the center of. And it left my mind like just very malleable, very just like broken. And so when they passed, I feel like some sort of burden of that left. I feel like some sort of energy dispersed to where it was like, okay, now all that guilt, all that whatever it is that you were feeling that was fucking you up, it kind of started to dissolve with them when they passed. And I feel like my mother's spirit and both of their spirits all want me to know the truth. That's what it feels like right now. And so my cousin Babette, she was diagnosed with cancer middle of last year, and for some reason she just felt inspired to contact Gilbert Police and just talk to them about the case, see if they would run like another whatever thing on the case. And so they decided they would, because it was a 30-year anniversary. You know, a lot of these like outlets, news stations, police stations, things like that, they only do things when it lines up with their schedule. So it happened to line up with their schedule, being a 30-year anniversary, missing persons month or something like that type shit. And so it worked out to our benefit. And they posted something on Twitter. Some new news outlets reached out to me, and when I went to talk to the first news outlet, it was very familiar. It was very much like all the news outlets I had talked to in my past, because I'd had follow-ups from like when I was like 7, then when I was like 12, then when I graduated from high school, and then again when I dropped Legend of the Phoenix, and then this is like the next follow-up as far as like news stories and press and stuff like that. But it felt so similar. It felt so regular. Like they weren't doing anything. They were just doing a news segment, you know. And I became really passionate when I was talking to the lady about the segment she was doing, because she made it very apparent that she just needed a segment by a certain time that day. And yeah, it was weird. And so I ended up getting like really upset about that situation and decided at that point that I was going to take the entire narrative into my own hands. And when I did that, I didn't feel the pressure that I felt prior. I didn't feel that same burden. I didn't feel my muscles tensing up. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel sweaty and clammy and all kinds of stuff. Like, it was just like, okay, you're a grown ass man now. Like, you're literally just digging into information. And not that it doesn't hurt. Like, whenever I still bring it up, like, it still fucks with me. But it's different. Like, there's just something different about my strength of mind between now and then. Like I said, my mind was very malleable in 2016. It was very easily influenced. I was doing a lot of things and making a lot of decisions and moves that, like, I would look back at now and say, like, that wasn't me. That wasn't what I was into or what I was trying to get across. But because of my environment, I was presenting it a certain way. But once it got to 2020, 2021, and my grandparents were no longer in the picture, I just felt that burden was lifted, and I could really take on all the shit with my own energy and not have, as many people's energy blocking me and holding me back because of their fears.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I admire you so much for doing that, because it's something, even if it happens 30 years ago, being that close to your heart, it doesn't get easier. It's just we as people, we learn how to manage the pain more instead of, maybe reacting to it how maybe we used to. Now,
Right.
what was the original narrative that you were maybe told as a child and that has been projected the last 30 years? And what are kind of the discrepancies that you've seen in this case that you feel need reinvestigated?
Yeah, I mean, early on, the main thing was just like my grandparents. It was like, she went missing. It's tragic. It's a missing persons case. Amber Alert, signs up, like, boo-hoo. That was the story. And then as time went on and I started to learn more things in life, and my uncles and aunts and my grandma started telling me more things, like when I was 12 years old, my grandma told me that my stepdad was my stepdad and not my real dad. So, like, that's when I realized, like, oh, okay, that guy that left me when I was 6 didn't leave me because he didn't love me. Like, he wasn't my dad. You know what I mean? Like, and my mom wasn't around anymore. So, like, that was like a fucking shift right there. And then my uncle just one day coming in the room and telling me about some dude that the family had beef with in the 90s, and some dude that had like a crush on my mom, and how, like, they always suspected him. And that threw my mind for a loop. Like, oh shit, like, it might be some shit like this. You know what I mean? Like, it just all became not so random and not so fairy tale-y. You know what I mean? And then as more information and more information and more information came about, it all became very like, okay, foul play. Like, this is like, something happened and someone did something to her, and my family for sure knows it. Like, it's not like she just went missing. Like, they know something happened, and they just were not able to prove it or something. And then, years later, then I go and talk to the police, and they tell me more details. They tell me about, other people who had, like, dated my mom in high school, or knew her from other jobs, or was jealous of her from this volleyball team, or like, just like random shit that it's like, okay, there's so many aspects of this that, like, I didn't know could be a possibility, and maybe not everyone in my family all knew together, but each of them had pieces of things like this. You know what I mean? To where it's like, okay, like, why did y'all let me think that, like, this was like, like, she just got kidnapped walking down the road for 15 years of my life? You know what I mean? Like, so I think that change and that adaptation kind of like set me on like a whole new, like, that's probably where I started writing. Honestly, that's probably where that came from, was because that's around the same age, like 13, 12. She told me that. And then like next thing you know, I'm writing, I'm filling up books, you know? So that's probably where that came from. But yeah, now, you know, in my early 30s, and I'm just like, I just found the courage to to go talk to them again, and listen to the things, and really, really hear and understand the things that they're telling me, and come to some more grown-up conclusions. And I'm coming with some more grown-up conclusions for fucking sure. And it's tough, but now I realize why it all had to come piece by piece. Like it's not without reason that it all had to come piece by piece, because I would be fucked up. Like I would be on the streets somewhere, like messed up, if it didn't come piece by piece so my brain could handle it.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect too, because like on our podcast, we both often talk with survivors and talking about childhood trauma and everything that you go through as a child, even if there's programming when you're young, all the way to even family secrets, and how that really does affect each person. And
Mm-hmm.
as you get older, you realize when you go deeper in and look at yourself in the mirror, and you're like, why do I act like this? Or why does this trigger me? Or
Right.
you start to learn more about yourself. So I think that's an important aspect from your point of view, even going back and having the courage to talk to your family and finding out the truth, because it really does mess with you as a person. But then could you imagine, like, as a child, if you knew all that information, it could have taken you down an even darker path. And the majority,
Yeah.
especially with mental health, the majority don't make it out. And that's where you see even today suicide on the rise, and you see people committing suicide left and right. And the mental health aspect is another thing in itself. So I think with you even having the courage to even go back to your family and have those conversations, that takes a lot of strength.
Absolutely. It hasn't been easy. That's for damn sure.
I mean, you're a
And then you
walking
still got to face those emotions. Like as it comes up, you still got to face those now emotions, and then even go back to like now more things are coming to your memory, and then you get flashbacks, and then now you're trying to function and even process those emotions as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like statistically, how many kids that had your type of upbringing where there was very little parental guidance end up making it to where you are today, not addicted to drugs, or, you know, worse, or even, you know, end up not being here today. It's incredible the path that you've taken and the way that you've used all the adversity in your life, and you've empowered yourself with it, and almost have given that gift to other people to say, I'm going to walk you through my story, through my music. It's going to be an outlet for me, because this is part of, you know, what helps me heal, and part of my therapy of getting this out of my body, you know. And that's even another point, understanding that energy, right? That it's not created or destroyed. So if we're not getting it out of our body somehow,
Yeah.
yes, different ways to do it. And it's really interesting how you've chosen the poetic element or the writing element, creating music, getting it out of your body that way. And you're giving a gift to so many people by sharing that. And I'm sure it's helping so many other people who are going through really hard times, you know, unconsciously, even listening to your music. They're taking all of that in, and their brain is storing your stories, which is really incredible. What are some other ways besides writing? What else has helped you from a healing perspective in being able to overcome all of this, and to not fall victim to the statistics that, you know, so many people end up falling into?
Um, I was, it all kind of goes hand in hand, because it's really just like the ambition. Like you need to find something to be addicted to. Like there's no way you're going to go through this life without some sort of routine or some sort of habits. So make your habits good. you know what I mean? Make your habits productive, you know? And I feel like that's what I've been able to do, is just like turn things that could be, you know, tragic or could be negative, just turn them into positives by making them productive. And normally that, you know, manifests itself through music. Sometimes it manifests itself through just like fathering, you know what I mean? Sometimes it manifests itself through so many different things. But I just feel like, you know, being a leader and being a role model and just really just like being a man and proving myself that I can be the man that I know I am. That's kind of what motivates me and keeps me driven to stay on the right path.
I love that. And I think it's awesome that your daughter gets to live vicariously through you, and like she's watching you too. You know, she has your example. What are some ways for you that you found helpful in parenting a child these days? It's, you know, we just talked, there's a lot of, you know, dark energy, whether people want to call it satanic or dark or, you know, symbolism, symbolic. There's a lot of darkness that children are pulled into, how we said from a very young age, we all are. How do you parent a child these days? And, you know, what are some tips that you could give to other parents who might be new to this or might be learning and, you know, want to try to help guide their kids in the right direction?
It's so funny that you're asking me this question, because I can hear her on her head, on like her PlayStation headset right now. And I want to like scream at her, like, be quiet. But um really, it's just like not assuming that I know what I'm doing. Like that's really what it comes down to. Like I just go with the flow. Like I make sure that if things are serious, then I treat them as so, and I talk to her and I break it down how it needs to be broken down. And if it's not so serious, I don't take it too serious, because I don't want to cause any like unnecessary trauma. I dealt with a lot of unnecessary trauma as a kid growing up in a military household. Like everything had to be just so, everything had to be perfect. And walking on eggshells. And I know that contributed to my anxiety. And all you really ever want for your kids is just to not have the things that you had to deal with, you know? So for me, it's just like creating an environment for her that she just feels loved, and she doesn't feel any kind of fear. She's not afraid to ask me anything. She's not afraid to tell me anything. Like I just want to create an environment of love. That's really it, you know?
Absolutely.
And they also share the space of music too. She's also on his track Possible.
Yeah, yeah. She's on every single one of my albums, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So on Destroyer, she was on my song The Edge. She's on the bridge at the end. And then on Possible, she's at the end, and she's also on a skit on my second album. And then on the Synchronicities album, she is doing like the what is it? Yeah, these like chants, like these chants in the song you mentioned, War of the Roses. You know the little kids that are going yeah in the background. That's her. So yeah, she's been on all my projects, and we're about to put out her first single this year.
Stop, no way. When can we expect that?
I don't know yet. She's here right now, so we're gonna like work on a few over the next month or so, and then just figure it out from there, you know?
Oh, that's so exciting and special.
Absolutely. And like it's cool because with intellectual property and the way that the internet has opened things up for creatives and stuff, like she can literally start like a savings fund with a music profile, you know, getting people to go stream her music, and it contributes to this fund that she's got until when she's 18, she can open it up, you know.
I love that. I can't wait for that one, especially because at the end or middle towards the end too, you talk about the mission you're on and like pretty much turning to God and asking for the vision. And then you credit your mom and your daughter and them being your biggest motivation. And then turning into, I know my other favorite song on that one is The Rising Sun.
Mm.
And there's a lot of them on there. But yeah, definitely if you're new to his music, check it out because there's a variety on all of his albums, especially on the latest one, and you'll be able to resonate. And I think too, as more people awaken, you hear your music differently and you can resonate with it on a deeper level and you start to see that shift. So I'm excited for even the work that you're doing with her as well.
I really appreciate listening to a lot of the artists that you've introduced me to, Bridge, including you, Kyle. There's so much thought that goes into it and so much more creativity. You don't have this massive team of people basically making music and all you have to do is sing into a microphone that's going to be manufactured and tweaked by a million people before it hits the radio, you know? It's so interesting seeing the creativity that goes behind. You have to think about all the instrumentals. You have to think about who you're going to invite on a track, who would be the right person for it, what the flow should be, what the message should be on it. And it's not, you might have some help, but it's not this big team. There's just so much more that goes into it. What else are you working on right now that people can look forward to?
Well, I have a children's book that I have had in the vault for about 3 years, and I'm finally going to release that this coming Christmas. So look out for that. And just more music. I got another project coming out that's also for sync for movies and television, and that's already getting placed in a lot of movies and stuff like that. So you'll be seeing that and hearing stuff from that. And then I'm just gonna keep making music this year, to be honest with you.
So exciting. And I love that song Glow too. That is such a cool track. I love the different, you guys all have a different style. There's a whole bunch of people that are on that one track and it's like you all contribute something so neat to it.
Right. That's one of my favorites and it's blowing up right now. It's almost at 100,000 views already. So
amazing. And as far as the investigation goes, what do you hope to get out of that? And is there a way that people can help support you who might be listening?
Give me 1 second, one moment.
Yeah, you got it. And Bridget, if I could ask you, for people who haven't heard Kyle's music, what are some recommendations as far as your favorites? I know everybody might think a little bit different as they listen to his music, but what are some of your favorite albums, songs? Where would you recommend people start who might be new to his music?
I would say start at definitely, they all have a different take. I would say if you're wanting to learn more about him as an artist and you want to follow him on his journey, definitely start from Destroyer. If you want to know more about his story with his mom, definitely go into The Legend of the Phoenix, where his intro on that, and then going into talking about the red coat and the first narrative and everything that he was told as a child, to then going through Alien has a fun twist to it. And you kind of see that alter of him. And then I would say Yap Yap is a super fun video, especially going through like the television and you see him be really goofy in that video. I would definitely say do that one because he's definitely really goofy in that video.
Me goofy? What?
Aw, not you.
It's
Never.
fun though, because it goes to like the television and like super old school and like infomercials. We're talking about Yap Yap. And that one's a fun video. But then I would say that I don't really have a favorite. I would say I listen to all his music, but this latest album is by far my favorite. Alien, it definitely topped Alien. I will say this album by far is my favorite. And I do like Glow, the new song Glow. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I loved hearing you guys both play off each other so well. She knows your music so well and your story. And so it's neat to see. I know you're so, it's hard to boast about like, hey, go listen to this or go listen to that. And you don't always know what other people think. I think it's really cool to have Bridget be like, hey, here's some of my favorites and here's some places to start.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I don't get to get that perspective as often, at least not like a genuine one. Normally it's like light work, like, you know what I mean? Or like, just like whatever my biggest songs are, like, they're just like, oh yeah, like if someone came up to like Lil Wayne and was always like lollipop, you know what I mean? Like, yes. He'd probably be like, man,
I would say watch his videos because he puts a lot of time and effort into those. And I would say with us doing podcasting and human trafficking and everything that we've learned, I know for me, especially during the whole pandemic, and we're doing podcasts on like satanic ritual abuse, the songs that I turn to, especially when I need an upper, I will always turn to Possible because I always look at the bigger picture. And when we are getting constantly attacked, I turn to his daughter's voice, knowing that that could be my daughter or his daughter. So I turn to Possible and his daughter's voice, and like that being the inspiration to keep going. And also Scary Place in that video. And you'll see him in a cage at one point. And I know for me, at the beginning of doing our work that we were doing, I took a survivor challenge and going into the woods, and her challenge was to sit in a cage or somewhere in a small space for 15 minutes. And so I did that in the middle of the woods in Sedona. So that's actually when I first went to him about, like, talking about human trafficking and everything. And then I was like, then he came out with Alien, and I'm like, okay, never mind. You already did that. Let's shift. Let's go to light. So he was already ahead of me on that one.
I didn't even know it. I didn't even really know it until we came together on that. And I was just like, oh shit. Like, I forgot. Like, I forgot I did this. Here, check this out.
So neat. I love both of those contributions. And Bridge, I appreciate you. You know, there might be some people listening who haven't heard of Sincerely Collins, and it's good to have that feedback of like, hey, here's some good places, or, you know, check out the video side or go listen to this whole album. So I appreciate you. Now, Kyle, what do you hope to get out of the investigation, and how can people support you as far as your music and or the investigation, if there's something that people can do to support you on that end?
Well, one thing that I realized as far as what I want to get out of the investigation is that I can't really have an expectation with something like this. It's so nuanced, it's so unique, you know. So I'm really just following what God's telling me when it comes to that. And I believe that my career and this situation go hand in hand, you know. It's always been like a back and forth thing. It's always given me the content that I use in my music. So I just, you know, I've always listened to what's her name? She's like the old basketball announcer, but she had cancer, and she did a speech at the ESPYs like 10 years ago, and she said, you have to make your mess your message, you know? And it's like, I always took that in and was just like, okay, like my mess is my message. Like that's what I'm here for. I've almost been privileged with this opportunity, you know? If you're in a simulation and you're outside of it and you're about to spawn into your character and you're trying to choose a character, like, are you gonna pick like some dude that like has some like non-controversial life, and you know what I mean? Like, you know, you're gonna pick the one that's like hard, like, okay, I'm picking level expert, you know what I mean, in this game and of life. And I just feel like I'm up for the challenge.
I forget whenever she did her live, but CJ Dunning, who we follow, she used to be a professional wrestler. And one of the things that she said that stuck with me, that just reminded me of what you said, she was like, when I was in that ring, I had to create this character that I wanted to be. I created this like badass, amazing girl, you know, and I had all these people that like loved that character in me. But then I'd go home and I was somebody totally different. She's like, but I loved that person that I was so much. And looking back, I want to be like, we can at any time choose to be that superhero, like that person that we envision ourselves to be, that avatar that we have in our head of, hey, I could be this person in my head, I'm this person, or if I do this, I'm this person. But why not be that person all the time and create that person that's within you that you know is there. And I love that you're doing that. It's so powerful.
I agree. Thank you.
You got it. Now, where are you on social media, on any type of music site? Where can people support your content? Where can people find you? Where can they get your music?
Yeah, you can get my music absolutely everywhere. Just type in Sincerely Collins on any platform and it'll pop right up. Make sure you spell sincerely right. And Instagram, Sincerely Collins, everything's just Sincerely Collins. Got it all.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate you coming on here too. I encourage everybody to go support you. You know, you don't have the big Hollywood monster. You didn't sell your soul to the devil. So it's harder for our voices to get heard. It takes us longer in any capacity, whether it's a podcast, whether it's music, anything where you're not backed by these major corporations and these billionaires. It's a longer journey, even though it might be more freeing and more liberating to do it that way. But I encourage everybody, you know, it's one thing to talk about separating yourself from what we oppose, which are these systems that we know aren't working. We know that they're abusive. We know that they have really toxic messages for adults and for children. But it's like Bridget and Kyle were saying, everybody's still participating. They're still going to concerts. They're sending their kids to concerts. They're buying albums. They're spending money. They're watching them on TV. They're listening to them in the car, you know, and we have this amazing music. We have these amazing artists that are coming out and opposing that and giving you an alternative to things that you want to step away from. Now, Kyle, real quick, what are some other artists that you would recommend people tap into right now and listen to along with your music?
It's a good question. I feel like I listen to weird people, or I listen, or I listen to like old shit. Okay, so it's not really relevant to anything like any of the subjects on the podcast, but I really like this artist named 070 Shake. She's really dope. I know there's someone else that I gotta be thinking of.
That's shocking. You're always listening to YouTube. You're always on YouTube watching videos.
Yeah, but I just feel like it's I feel like if I brought people up, it'd be like, it would be so irrelevant to this podcast. Because I listen to like, I just listen to like random shit that I listen to Masego. Yeah, he's good. FKI. I like I really like that singer kid, that new singer kid. He sings that song. Who would have thought I'd get you? Who sings that shit? Daniel Caesar. I like Daniel Caesar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's enough. I tried really hard to think of those.
I know it's hard to think of a spot too.
Sorry. Going off of your wordplay of weird, can you go, let's see, how do I want to say this? For anyone dealing with mental health and who may be called or bullied weird kid, odd kid, conspiracy theorist, trolled for whatever reason, anyone dealing with adversity or kind of like an outcast, what would your advice be to those kids or anyone listening, really?
I would just say to just figure out a really good wardrobe to go with your quirkiness, because that's going to end up being your superpower. Like, I feel like weird is the new cool. Weird is just like what like, you don't want to be normal anymore. Like people want to be different, you know? It's just about being genuine and being different. Just own yourself.
Love it.
Is there anything else that you want to say, Kyle, before we tie it up here?
No, nothing other than just thank you guys for having me, and it's been awesome.
Oh man, it's so fun to finally get to chat with you. I feel like I already know you, just following you and talking vicariously through Bridge. You know, she just thinks the world of you, and she's been, every time you have something new out, like she just sends it in our group text. She's like, you have to go listen to this. It's so awesome. You know, so it's great to finally have you on here. You've been a huge inspiration for me, and it's great to finally put a face to the name and to bring you on. And hopefully a lot of people got a ton out of this, as we have too. Bridge, is there anything you'd like to close with?
No, just thank you for having me on your podcast. And of course, for you, Kyle, wish you nothing but success.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure. And yeah, whenever you guys need me, just let me know.
Everybody, please go follow Kyle, follow Bridget. Bridget, can you tell real quick where you're at too for people who are watching? Where are you at on social?
At Beauty by B with 4 underscores, or at Save Our Children podcast. You'll connect to everything that Emma, myself, and Becky are doing, as we are on a mission to be voices for the voiceless and be the generation to end human trafficking.
I love that. Everybody, please go follow both of them, support our podcast, subscribe, comment, share. It's the best way to help all of us grow. We all need to work together. We did a podcast with Jaco Boyens recently, who made a great point that we need to start giving independent artists and podcasters and people that are stepping away from the mainstream, we need to give them more resources. And this is no different. Please go follow Bridget's podcast, the Save Our Children podcast. Go buy Sincerely Colin's music, dive into it, pay attention, sit down and just listen to it from front to end, all his albums, listen to the music, take it in, compare it to the music that you're listening to currently, and decide for yourself kind of how you look at what we've been conditioned to accept versus what else is out there for you. Give him your money, support his albums whenever they come out, follow him on social, share him, share all of his content, share this interview. And I just am so appreciative for all of you guys listening. We couldn't do this without you. So survivors, we hear you, we see you, we stand by you, and we will see you next week.